how can money be morally okay, religiously speaking? I have more thoughts as a non-formally trained Christian who goes to church most Sundays, but here it is Family Day weekend, and I'm at Sleeping Giant Provincial Park, not at service. So I read from the Bible that my grandpa was given by his parents in 1929. And I read the passages that come to mind so often in my day-to-day work. The parable of the talents, or in the book of Luke, it's a nobleman who's going off to actually accept a kingdom. And while he's gone, he entrusts his servants with his goods to occupy his role in the community, trading those goods. In the book of Matthew's, it's talents. And he has 3 servants. So one of them he gives 5 pieces of money to, talents, another 3 and another 1, according to his judgment of their ability to do this job. So a few things that I just think about a lot. And one is, he's going away, and there's no talk about him needing to leave money for his servants to be able to, pay their rent or buy their food or educate their children. All that is assumed to be taken care of. Instead, this is money that is just needed to make money. And in both tellings of this story that Jesus told just a couple of days before he was crucified, when he was being celebrated by the masses, the heads of the church were getting kind of freaked out, because when Jesus came back to Jerusalem, the people came out in giant crowds, and they're like taking the clothes off their back and throwing them on the ground. So he walks upon them instead of on the dusty path, cutting down branches from the trees and laying those before his feet and calling him, the great prophet of Nazareth. And so much of the preamble in the book of Matthew is the chief priests coming to challenge Jesus and try to poke holes in his reputation and trip him up with theology. And of course they fail, but he spends a lot of time saying, listen, dudes, you got to rethink what your job here on earth is. It is not about power. It is not about wealth. It is about prayer. It is about humbling yourself, not claiming your glory here in our life on earth. So to get back to the book of talents, the story of talents, those that had been entrusted with these goods to trade, what are they doing, right? This is not stock market era. They're taking this money and they're not investing it in something vague. They're literally going into the community and hearing pitches for this opportunity to do things better, more efficiently, waste less, serve the community in its needs for security and for food and for shelter in a better way. And so, they give that money to that idea, that enterprise, that effort. They leave it there until it succeeds or fails. There's no guarantee of success, right? But often people are good at knowing what will be helpful. And so it is successful. And once it's had a chance to be put into action and prove its worth, there is more to be taken back out of that enterprise than you put into it. You have a profit, and you can go off and spend that profit in helping somebody else realize their vision of what would work well, right? That's at its core value, that is investing. So in both these tellings of the parables, and I always think about that, I love when there's a parable or a story in the Bible that's in there more than once, because it reminds me of the fallible human beings who witnessed this ministry and shared the story of how it sung to their hearts, how they understood it in their souls, and how they remembered it, which was then told to other people, and it shaped the church. But it is not exactly the same, right? It's imperfect, as are we. So, forgive me this understanding, because it's as imperfect as am I. But in both tellings of those that went out and invested, traded, as they call it, successfully, when the owner came back, the nobleman in one story, the master in another, and asked, so how'd it go? The more that they had succeeded, in doubling or more. Like in one story in the book of Luke, he's given 1 pound of goods, and by the time the nobleman comes back, he has 10 pounds of goods to show for the success of his investment in the community. And in reward, the nobleman says, well, job well done. It was little enough that I asked of you. Not an amazing thing, but still, I can entrust you with running 10 cities. Now that I have a kingdom, you get to manage 10 of my cities. You who took 1 and turned it to 5, you get 5 cities. And in the other story, it's like, you who had a 1 talent or 5 talents and now have 10, job well done. But then in both cases, one of them says to their master, I have to give back to you what you trusted to me. But that's not all they say. They say, because I'm scared of you, man. Like, I really am not comfortable with the fact that you benefit from the labor of others, right? You eat food when you've never planted a seed. You sleep on fine linens when you've never learned to weave. I don't like that, and I think you're tight-fisted and unreliable, and so I'm scared of you, and I was not willing to risk losing what you'd entrusted to me. So one dude dug it up and buried it in the garden, and then went and dug it up again when they were asked to give it back, and the other one wrapped it in a napkin so its tempting little glint of gold could not be seen. And in both cases, the person who'd asked them to go and do what that's meant to be doing, right, was furious. He said, at the very least, I understand that you're afraid of me. If you're not willing to go out and bravely invest and trade, at the very least, you should have taken that and loaned it and gotten it back with interest. Right, so here we have a picture, right? For me, it's classic, traditional equity, stock, ownership in business, and bonds, loans, usury, right? Loaning money out and getting it back. That's what they're talking about. And when he wouldn't even loan it out, when he wanted to leave it in his checking account or bury it in his mattress, that was the big sin that Jesus says, he got punished for. And the other people listening go, well, that doesn't seem fair. And the answer he gives is, those that have much will get much, and those that have none might lose even what they have. Whew! Harsh, man. That's harsh. But again, we're not talking about what you need in order to meet your needs, right? Not shelter, food. All of that is outside of this story. What he's talking about is what you have been gifted and entrusted with. And it's interesting that in the book of Matthew, they call them talents. It's something that comes easily to you. When you do it, you just feel the glory of God kind of sing through you, because there's a talent, and you can fail to embrace that. Be afraid of it, bury it in the backyard, because it doesn't necessarily make you money. It's kind of risky. People might judge you for it. But if you dare to exercise and invest in your talents, whether it be money that you don't need for your immediate needs and can put out in the world to do a job within the community, or it's actually just a capacity you have, then you are blessed in going forward to do that. And further in my reading, I'm thinking about the rich man who gives away half his wealth and also seeks out cases of injustice so he might give them justice. But most importantly, he goes running to chase after Jesus, recognizing him as a prophet, climbs a tree, which is not a very, fancy-dancy man kind of thing to do, to catch his attention, and is told, for you, grace might be found. It's easy to mistake the securities of money for grace, but actually it's the humbleness of generosity and of believing in the visions of those around us that I think grace can be found. But those are just my thoughts. I hope you found them interesting.